All right. Thank you, Taylor. Let me share here. Okay. You guys should see that. So, all today we're going to talk about a topic that has really been hidden in the news and hidden in life. No one really talks about it at all. It's AI specifically, um, and how search is having an impact on pretty much everything we do. I jest, of course. I'm sure you all are kind of drinking from a fire hose. I know I am every single day as things change, as companies invent just amazing ways to use the technology. But in my lens, from my world, have about 30, roughly 30 years of marketing for tech, finance, healthcare. But it's really interesting. I was talking about this in the last focus group that we did, or the last breakout that we did. What I did 2 years ago as a marketer is completely different than what I do today. And for somebody that's done this for a while, with all of the changes we've seen in marketing, coming up through Google emerging, coming up through the ad vehicles that we now have, all the different ways to measure marketing. When I first started doing marketing, marketing really wasn't measurable. It was about brand, it was about printed ads, and it was about doing things that were very hard to prove ROI from. And that's completely changed. And AI has really just accelerated that path to where there's not only change, but there's a real opportunity if you grasp it for smaller organizations to start to get a land grab from these big brands that have dominated the search marketplace for so long. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to dive into one thing that I continue to see. I would say a lot of my business today is focused around helping smaller and growth companies figure out what their website should do for them, whether it's generate leads or give them better presence on Google. But the one thing that I continuously see, and I would say I see this maybe nine out of 10 of the companies that I work with, they put a lot of time and energy into building these beautiful websites. I'll give you an example. There's a company called Lovable.dev, if you've heard of it or seen it before. It basically is an AI-powered website development tool. You can do all kinds of things. You can build apps, you can build websites, but a lot of people use it for websites. And what it's particularly good at is allowing someone that has zero experience building a website to create something that looks like a professional built it. But here's the rub, and here's really where most companies that I work with are struggling, is that they build these beautiful websites, but when they look at their analytics and understand and look at really what's happening, they see that they're not getting much traffic. They're seeing they're not getting much engagement. And probably most important for most companies is they aren't getting the form fills they want. They're not getting leads. So why spend all of the time and the energy on these sites if you're not getting found? So that's the problem. As you guys all know, I just kind of have to put this out there to even the playing field in case people are coming from different levels of knowledge. Google really isn't the only front door to finding your website anymore, right? We've got ChatGPT, we've got Perplexity, Gemini, which essentially is Google's AI search platform. We've got Microsoft's Bing. We've got all kinds of different platforms that are just starting to emerge that are specialty within niches and different verticals. But what this really gives us the opportunity to do now is to kind of upset the cart and figure out how we can start to steal some of these opportunities from companies perhaps that have been embedded for years and years and have been showing up first. Some of these smaller companies and early stage companies now have the opportunity using AI as kind of the Trojan horse to get in and to make a big difference. So that's why there's so much interest right now, what's going on with AI. So the biggest thing that I think most companies fail to do when they build a new website is they typically build it for one of the three different languages that your website needs to speak. Your website should speak three languages. What most people do is build it for the human. They basically say, great, I'm going to do the best job that I can possibly do to explain the product or the service that we have. But the reality is that if you want to get found on Google and some of these answer engines, your site needs to speak these three languages. It needs to speak SEO. And when I say speak SEO, this is the traditional school of thought of optimizing your pages for specific keywords, having a structure. You probably have heard of H1, H2, H3, basically the different sizes of font on a page. Google looks at those and figures out basically the biggest fonts. The H1 basically is the most important thing on the page, and so forth as it goes through. You still need to do that. It's incredibly important. AEO, it's a different ballgame. AEO can help you move incredibly fast. In search, it might take months for you to rank on a word that your company is focused on. Answer engines are very different. They move a lot quicker. And to do it correctly, you really need to focus on semantics, structure, and a lot of times just picking the right things that you know your audience is talking about and being able to talk about them. And we'll dive in as I go through some of these pages to how you do that. But those are the three languages that your site really needs to speak if you want to succeed online and get found. And feel free to throw questions out, or if you guys have a question about anything I'm saying, please interrupt me. I'd love to field those in real time. So the problem is the invisible website, right? You've built this great site, you've spent a ton of time and energy on it, but one of the big problems that most companies have when they start to dive into this is they decide they're going to jump in and they try something and it fails. And building these types of visibility, getting this type of visibility on a website isn't just a one-off, set it, forget it kind of thing. It's a lot of experimentation. Marketing is largely about experimentation, especially today. But if you can figure out how to become visible on one word or one phrase, that compounds rather quickly. The opposite is also true. If you leave your site in the state that it's in and it's not getting any kind of visibility from Google and the answer engines, it's going to stay that way for a long time. And it's going to take you a longer amount of time to actually start to get that visibility you want. So it's a fairly important thing to do to understand out of the gate what you should do, monitor it, and then actually make the adjustments that you can start to get that visibility. Unfortunately, all of this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It just takes time to do. And the earlier you start, the better position you're going to be in. So with that, I'm going to throw out something that's been around for a very long time that you should be familiar with. It's called EEAT. This is Google's framework, and Google's been doing this almost since day one. Google uses the EEAT framework as a way to figure out what your page is really saying and how important that page is. So the EAT stands for experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So it uses those four different topics to figure out how good your pages are. And with all of the AI tools that are out there that have accelerated the amount of content that's being published on the web today, this really is more important than ever to get right. So if you're not familiar with this term, we don't have the time to kind of really dive too deeply into it, but just jot that down and look that up and use it as a filter or as a lens to look at your site as it exists today and ask yourself for the pages that are most important on your site, are you passing this test for Google? If you are, you're likely getting ranked a lot better than those that aren't. So let me dive into some practical things, which is probably one of the major reasons you guys decided to show up today. Some practical ways that you can use some of these ideas to accelerate the visibility of your website. And I've got 10 of them. I mean, there's probably 30 or 40, but I think these are probably the top 10 if I had to pick 10. First and most important is everyone talks about making sure that you define the problem you solve, right? Your website should, in great detail, explain specifically the problems because that's what you're selling. You're solving problems more than likely on your website. And one of the big mistakes that I see people do is that they fail to position it in terms that the competition or that your actual customer understands and are similar to what your competition is doing. You've got to differentiate how you position yourselves in a way that explains what the problem is without sounding like your competition. So it's almost two in one, differentiation as well as positioning. The second big one is just think about your website and your pages on your website as addressing the different levels of buyer intent, right? You probably have people come to your site. They're in the very early stages of research. They maybe don't know who you are. Maybe they are unfamiliar with the problems that you're trying to solve for them. So you actually need to have pages that address different parts of that buying journey so that you give people a way to progress through your site, to see the value that it provides and get the form fills that you want. The third one it is, I would say, just as important as the first two. Using your customer's language and using terms that they use on your site is far more important than making the site sound the way that you think it should sound. It's incredibly important. I've worked with so many founders that want to word things a certain way or want to explain things a certain way. But if it's different than the way that your clients are actually speaking, it causes a problem. And that problem basically is really difficult to overcome once you've started down a path of your site and have built out a good amount of your site. Once you hit a certain amount of volume, you start to run into problems. So you want to kind of get this right out of the gate, or if you're going through a redesign of your site, you want to make sure you're thinking that through up front. A big one that a lot of people fail to address as well is understanding what that visitor journey looks like. As I mentioned on the last slide, it's incredibly important to address the problems and expertise and basically the position someone's mind is at a certain point. You kind of have to build your content on your site so that it's in these what they call pillar and cluster content structures. Pillars basically are pages that go into great depth about exactly what it is you do and how you can help them. Cluster content, think of that as basically little offshoots of that content that goes deeper into certain aspects. And if you do a good job of structuring your content like that, search engines like Google and the AI equivalents love that structure. It's called pillar and cluster, and something that you need to do to really make sure that your site is structured properly. The fifth one that I think is incredibly important for speed and answer engines is this new style of page that you're probably starting to see on websites. You see a lot of these fact pages, right? Frequently asked questions. And you might have a blog post, and at the bottom, there are 5 or 6 questions that are answered in that same blog post. Answer engines absolutely love these things. They eat them up. And it's a great way by inserting these facts into your content for you to basically start to get visibility on, in places like ChatGPT fairly quickly. And then finally, number 6 on this one, a big one is just not straying too far from traditional structure that has worked so well for SEO. It still works today, using headers, using bullets, using short paragraphs, using things that a search engine can easily understand and they're formatted properly. But it's great for search, but it's also great for people. People don't have as much time to spend reading things as they used to. It seems to get the attention spans seem to get shorter and shorter each year. For every client I work with, I look at what Google Analytics tells me and how long they're actually staying on sites. And it's interesting to see continually the dwell time, the time that people actually spend on a site continue to shrink. So we just have to get better. As designers, as web developers, we've got to get better at structuring these pages so we get the message across quickly and in a way that makes people want to click through and spend time on the site. Number seven and number eight are often overlooked. They're easy to forget, but one of the big things that strengthens a website is making sure that you use internal links. In other words, putting links from content to other useful content that you have. And it's helpful for a reader, of course, but if you are getting a site that is crawled by Google and Google sees that for a specific topic, you've got not only the page that it found, but five other pages that are linked to it that are relevant to that page. It's going to elevate your essentially your status for that topic, and it's going to give you more visibility in the search engine, which is exactly what you want. Um, Number eight big one is making sure that your site is indexed. I can't tell you how many times I go and I look at a website and I look at basically what Google sees when they crawl that site, which a lot of people don't do. You can go into a tool called Google Search Console, and it will tell you exactly which pages it sees, which pages it's indexed, and which pages it's decided not to index. And there's a lot of different reasons it decides not to index pages, but the takeaway is if it doesn't get indexed, it's not getting cited. So there's tools you can use to understand exactly what's being cited. If it's not being cited, you either want to remove it or you want to change it so that it's providing value to you. The other thing that I tell folks is that it's not only important to have internal links, but if you've got partners, if you've got sites that are non-competitive that you can externally link to, it's going to help your credibility as well. And a lot of people kind of fail to do the external links, but if you can, put a few internal links, put an external link on there, and just make sure that all of your pages are indexed and on your sitemap. Incredibly important to do. So the last two that I'll cover fairly quickly because I think I'm close to time here, but it's incredibly important to look at and understand what search engines are doing. There are plenty of great tools out there that you can use to get a lot of color on what's happening today. Tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs, these tools give you a really deep dive into the keywords you're targeting, who owns the keywords, the volume, why people go to the pages that they go to for those words. Incredibly important to do that. And then finally, number 10, just make sure that you publish consistently. It really is, especially for an early stage company, a way to set yourself apart and to make sure that you are getting found for the types of terms in the answer engines and search engines that you want to. So Taylor, I think I'm at time. I've got a couple of other slides, but I'm happy to stop here if we want.
Thank you very much. Super interesting. Thank you for sharing. If anyone has questions, please queue them up in the chat. We can jump in there and do Q&A. And so as you're all putting questions in for Dave, we can start with Kara's comments. SEMrush is super expensive. Are there less expensive tools to use?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's expensive because SEMrush has the world's largest keyword database. Ahrefs is the same way. It's fairly aggressive on price. But a great way to start if you're budget strapped is go into ChatGPT and you can ask ChatGPT to guide you and say, well, of these words, what do you think is going to get me the most attention? It's not going to be as accurate. You're going to get what you pay for, right? You pay 20 bucks for ChatGPT, you're going to get an answer and it's not going to be anywhere as involved. It's not going to tell you the intent that people go, and it's not going to give you all the color that you would get with a SEMrush type of tool, but it's a great start, if you're on a budget is a fantastic way to start diving into this. The main thing is you're thinking about it and that you're putting some movement and some direction towards doing that versus going in blindly and just hoping that the words you're choosing are the right words.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. For startups that are just getting into this, getting their first website up, they went to Lovable like you suggested.
Yeah.
what are the first one, two, or three things that they should be doing on their brand new website to kick things off?
I've got, I'm going to leave the link for you here. This deck is up at midday.haasmarketing.co. Look through that list of the 10 things that we went through. And that list, if you check off all those 10 things, that is a great way to start, right? Make sure that you are thinking intentionally about the problems that you solve. Make sure you're using language that your customers use to describe that problem. Make sure that you've gone into ChatGPT, or if you're lucky enough to have SEMrush, go into SEMrush and do the research and make sure that you're using the right words and building the content in the right way. And just make sure it's structured. I built this deck that you're looking at with Lovable. I'm a huge fan of Lovable. I think it's a phenomenal platform, but it will, if you're not careful, just like AI, if you don't give it the right prompts, it's not going to lead you in the right direction. So if you're using a tool like Lovable, go in and ask it, hey, is this site optimized for these three words? Ask it if it's properly tagged and structured so that answer engines will find it. Ask it all these things and it will answer. It'll eat your credits, of course, but it'll answer those for you and it'll help you fix those things. I'm fortunate because I hopped into Lovable, I use it. I know the questions to ask it. I can tell when it builds something that I know isn't quite right. Basic stuff like I built a website for a client using Lovable, and it really hadn't done the site index properly. It hadn't built the right indexing for answer engines. As soon as I asked it to do it, it did it, and it was fantastic. But those are the types of things you kind of have to know to ask to make sure that it takes you down that right path.
Great, great tactical suggestions.
Yeah.
Uh, Steph George asked, "Do you think blogs are still worth it in 2026?"
100%. They're more important than ever. Blogs, well, let me preface that with pillars, clusters, blogs. Use that structure. It's been around for 20 years, 30 years, right? Use that structure. Build your pillar pages, build the cluster pages, build your blogs. Don't blindly write blogs, but if you write blog content, which typically is shorter format than your clusters and your pillars, they support that search that when Google crawls or the answer engines crawl your site, they not only see that you've got a deep pillar page and some clusters around it, but they also see that you have blogs. And the blogs are incredibly important. So many people make this mistake. They don't put any links to who their author is on the blog. I write a blog. I not only have myself authoring it, but I have a link on my name that goes to my LinkedIn profile. And that's a way of signal when Google uses that EEAT framework that we talked about. It's a great signal for Google to see, okay, this is a guy that's done marketing for 30 years. He kind of knows what he's talking about. Do that. Make sure that, if you've got that deep expertise, if you've got people that are leaders in their field, put their name and the link to their LinkedIn that, on those blog posts that give it that credibility you need.
Hmm. Um, oh, do you use Substack at all for discovery?
I love Substack. I use it to write. I follow a lot of folks that do talk about the things that I do because, I've been doing this for a while, but there's always new ideas out there. Another really good source, though, for discovery, is Reddit. Reddit is really interesting today for answer engine optimization because Reddit you can see what hot topics are, right? In your particular subreddit area, if there is one for what you do. Look at what people are asking. Look at threads that have the most discussion around them. Those are indicators without owning a SEMrush. type of a tool that tell you that a topic's important or interesting to a lot of people, and that's what you want. So I do a lot with Reddit actually. Not a lot of people do, but I find it's an incredibly cool way to kind of understand, get a pulse of what people are talking about in your segment. I will say don't promote on Reddit. Don't go in there if you're new to Reddit or haven't used it a lot. Don't go in there and promote your brand or your product because you'll get absolutely torched. But use it as a listening tool.
Okay, great advice. You had a slide that talked about how to check if your content is working. Um, can you go a little bit deeper on that? Any suggestions? Maybe how to?
Yeah, these are three kind of free ways that are available to you that if you're not already using, you need to jump into today or have somebody on your team jump into today. Um, of the three, Google Search Console is my go-to. I mean, I have a lot of really cool, expensive tools that I use, like SEMrush, but Google Search Console is amazing. You go into Google Search Console, it tells you what pages it sees. It tells you what pages it doesn't see. It tells you why it indexes and why it doesn't index. It gives you input on how people are finding you. In other words, what did they type in that led them to your site? What did people type in that didn't lead to your site? Google Search Console is completely free, and it's a tool that everyone that is serious about marketing that I know uses extensively. You can go into Google Search Console, and when you put a new blog post up, for example, you can give Google the URL to that new page and ask it to index it. It's free to do. Otherwise, Google doesn't hit your site every single day. There's too many sites on the web for it to possibly hit everyone every day, especially early stage companies, smaller companies. It might only hit your site once every few months. So go into Search Console, tell it you have new content, and within typically a few days, it's pretty good. Even my website's a small website. Within a few days, I get an alert back that it's analyzed my content and now has indexed it. Incredibly important to do. One that's often overlooked that I love is Bing has this thing called Bing Webmaster Tools. Again, completely free. It's the only one out there that I know of that will actually share with you what's happening on AI. So granted, it's all Microsoft's search, right? Which represents maybe 5% of desktop search in the US. It's a sliver compared to what Google, but it's a good signal. Even though it's smaller in volume, it's a great signal to understand how people are finding you and what's the search engine, basically the AI component of Microsoft is seeing, and it will collect the phrases that people are typing in. And you'll be surprised when you go to it. Like it's always a surprise how people are finding you through AI. It really is. That's a good one. Sign up for that one. You have to sign up, but it's free. And then, of course, tried and true Google Analytics. Hopefully, everybody here is using that already. If you're not, drop the free pixel in to your website, and it will tell you exactly how many people are coming, where they're coming from, how long they're staying, all that good stuff, where they're going. Great tool, completely free.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Maybe last question, and then we'll be at time. Uh, what are some of the common mistakes you see as people are building credibility, authority, etc., on their sites? And maybe that wasn't the last question because Devin raised his hand.
Sure. Yeah, the biggest one I see is that people write like they're writing poetry versus writing from a standpoint of analytics. They are focused on making the website use words that sound good, that maybe are words that they like to use. versus doing the research before writing a page and understanding what words the market's using and understanding what words have a higher search volume. Not only a higher search volume, but go into ChatGPT, right, or Claude or whatever your favorite go to is, and ask it specifically, hey, here's what I'm doing. What are the words that people are using to get found in an AI search engine? And you'll be surprised what it comes up with. Um, One of the things that, again, if you can afford it, if you've got this in your budget, um, if you can get a hold of a tool like SEMrush or Ahrefs, what that will do for you is not only tell you the volume, right, around those words and how often it's being used, but it'll also tell you the intent, which is incredibly important. Is this an intent that's a consumer intent? Is it informational, meaning are people just going to this site to kind of understand it better? Because that then informs your content. And not understanding that before you go and build your website or pages on your site, that's probably the biggest mistake you can make because you're putting all this energy into it and you're just not going to get found.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Devin, you've got the honor of last question.
Well, more of a gratitude moment, Dave. I just threw your website link and my portfolio company website into Claude and said, what do you got?" and got 15 suggestions of really
Nice.
tactical things like you have, you know, headers that are formatted incorrectly and you're missing these links and stuff. So just want to echo, like, I had no idea the number of small non-content related things that my website didn't have to help its discoverability. So I think sometimes we get overwhelmed with, yeah, we should all be publishing more often, and that's a solution to a lot of things. I
Yeah,
appreciate that your slides were both content and mechanical in helping it.
sure.
Last thing, I put a note in the chat, but a couple people have reached out interested to learn a little bit more about the Summit operator experience. I lead up operator relations at Summit. I'm an operator myself. I lead one of the portfolio companies. So just wanted to put it out if anyone else is interested. And thanks to the folks that have already reached out, we'll get on the schedule and chat. But it's a great ecosystem. And for those that are interested in maybe kicking the tires on what the next opportunity might look like, we're screening like 1,000 projects a month from different universities. So there's a lot of opportunities to find something that fits your interest. Dave, great presentation, man.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Devin.
Pleasure to be here.
Um, Dave, I put the slides link into the chat as well as the link to the blueprint. I went to your blueprint website so everybody can see those in the chat and click through to them if they're interested. Um, any any suggestions or parting words for us, Dave, and then we'll shut down for the week.
Pick one of the 10 things we talked about, do one this week. You'll see
Awesome.
the you'll see it, you'll see the needle move.
Okay. Great challenge for everyone. Thanks for coming. And if you've got questions, please reach out to Dave. His contact information is there. And yeah, really appreciate your time, Dave. We look forward to seeing everybody next week, same time. And thank you so much. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity.
See you all later.
Bye-bye.